The rain hit Lagos like 1,000 tiny hammers, pounding relentlessly against the pavement. James sat in his spacious office, staring out the large windows at the storm. The skies had darkened, and the city streets below were flooded with water, cars creeping along at a slow pace. He liked to watch the rain when he needed to think. It gave him a sense of control over things that were otherwise out of his hands. But today, his mind wasn't focused on the rain. It was somewhere else, somewhere far back in his past. Back when he was just another poor, awkward boy trying to fit in. He could still remember it like it was yesterday, the torment, the laughter, the constant reminders that he was different. It was a time that had shaped him in ways he hadn't fully realized back then. Now, as the CEO of a successful tech company, James had everything he could ever want. Money, power, respect. But there was one thing that still haunted him, the name Agatha. James had been nothing more than a shadow at his high school. He wasn't part of the popular crowd, nor did he have the latest clothes or the best gadgets. He came from a humble background. His mother worked as a school teacher, and his father had passed away when he was young. Life was hard, but he had dreams. Big dreams. But Agatha? She had everything. Her father was one of the wealthiest men in Lagos. She was tall, elegant, and carried herself with an air of superiority. Everyone in school admired her. And she made sure everyone knew it. Agatha had a group of friends, girls who were just as rich and popular as she was. Together, they ruled the school, and James, with his plain clothes and shy demeanor, was their favorite target. It was a particular day in their final year of high school that James would never forget. The annual talent show. It was an event where everyone could show off their talents, whether it was singing, dancing, or something else. James, despite being the quiet, reserved boy, had a talent. He loved to sing. And for the first time in his life, he decided to put himself out there. He had practiced for weeks, perfecting his voice, determined to overcome his fears. The day of the talent show arrived, and James could feel the butterflies in his stomach. His heart raced as he walked up to the stage, the bright lights blinding him for a moment. He could hear the murmurs from the crowd, the students who had gathered to watch. It was nerve-wracking. He took a deep breath and began singing. His voice, though shaky at first, began to steady. The words flowed from him, and for a moment, he felt at peace. But then, just as he was beginning to find his rhythm, he heard it. A sharp, mocking voice from the front row. "What is he doing up there?" Agatha's voice rang out, clear and loud. "Does anyone want to hear him sing? He sounds like a dying cat." The laughter erupted immediately. James's heart dropped, and all his confidence vanished. He froze on stage, his voice faltering. The other students laughed along with Agatha, who sat there with a smug smile on her face. Her friends joined in, throwing snide remarks his way. He could feel the heat rising in his face as his stomach twisted in embarrassment. He looked down at his feet, wishing he could disappear. Agatha's laughter echoed in his ears, and he could do nothing but turn and rush off the stage. The sound of her mocking words stayed with him as he ran to the back of the auditorium, tears stinging his eyes. It was a moment that broke him, but also one that fueled his fire for the years to come. James finished high school with little fanfare. He didn't go to a prestigious university or have a carefree youth. He spent his time studying, focusing on his education and his future. He wasn't going to let Agatha's cruelty define him. Years later, after an intense period of hard work, James graduated from university with honors. He went on to build a successful tech company, a company that eventually made him a millionaire. The boy who had once been laughed at was now a powerful man. But even with all his success, there was still one thing that bothered him. Agatha. James hadn't thought about Agatha in years. He had long moved on from the torment of high school, but sometimes, the memories would resurface, especially during moments of success when he felt like he had something to prove. One morning, as James sat at his desk in his office, his assistant, Ngozi, knocked on the door. She entered, holding an envelope. "Sir, this just came in for you." She handed him the envelope, and he looked at it, confused. There was no return address, just his name scribbled on the front in a familiar handwriting. His breath caught when he saw the name. Agatha. James opened the envelope slowly, his fingers trembling. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words on it were simple but powerful. "I need a job. Please help me, James." There it was. The name he hadn't thought about in years. Agatha. His first instinct was to throw the letter away, to ignore it and move on. After all, she had been the one who had made his life miserable. She had humiliated him in front of everyone, and now she was asking for help? But something inside him stopped him. It was as if the letter had a pull on him, a connection he couldn't explain. After a moment, he picked up the phone and dialed the number written at the bottom of the letter. It rang a few times before a familiar voice answered. Hello. Agatha's voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure how to speak to him after all these years. Agatha. James's voice was calm, though his heart raced. It's James. I received your letter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. James, I'm sorry for everything that happened back in school. I was young and foolish. I didn't understand the impact of my actions. James frowned. Was she really apologizing? After all these years? Why now? Why are you asking me for help? James asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Agatha's voice wavered. I've lost everything. My family, the business, everything. I don't have anywhere else to turn. She sounded exhausted, as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. Please, James, I need a job. Please help me. James stared out the window at the pouring rain, the storm still raging outside. For a moment, he was silent. The pain from his past flickered in his mind, but he knew he couldn't ignore her plea. All right, Agatha. Come to my office tomorrow. We'll talk then. The next day, Agatha showed up at James's office. He barely recognized her. She was no longer the proud, confident girl he remembered. Her clothes were old, faded, and her once perfect hair was unkempt. The girl who had once been so untouchable now stood before him, looking broken. She seemed uncomfortable in the sleek, modern office, her eyes darting around nervously. James studied her, wondering what had happened to the girl who once tormented him so effortlessly. James, I'm sorry. I don't deserve your help. Agatha's voice cracked as she spoke, and for a brief moment, James saw something he hadn't expected: guilt. James wasn't sure what to say. He had always imagined that he would feel joy or satisfaction when the tables turned, but now that they had, he was unsure of how to react. I'll help you, Agatha, but I need to know something first. James paused, taking a deep breath. Why should I help you after what you did to me in high school? Agatha looked down, her shoulders slumped. I was wrong, James. I know that now. And I've paid for it. Please. I just need a chance. James wasn't sure what drove him to make the next decision. Maybe it was the sight of the once powerful Agatha now standing before him, broken and vulnerable. Maybe it was the memory of the boy he had been, desperate for acceptance and respect. I have an opening for a maid in my household. It's not glamorous, but it's a job. Agatha stared at him in shock, the humiliation evident on her face. You're asking me to be your maid? She whispered, as if the idea had never crossed her mind. James's voice was calm, but there was a hard edge to it. Yes, Agatha. Take it or leave it. She hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. I'll take it. And just like that, their fates had collided again. The boy who had been humiliated in front of the entire school was now the man who held Agatha's future in his hands. James stood at the door of his mansion, watching as Agatha stepped into the large, polished hallway. The familiar scent of lavender lingered in the air as the sun set outside, casting golden rays through the grand windows. The house, which had always felt like a symbol of success and power to James, now felt empty, almost too quiet. Agatha's figure looked out of place in the sleek, luxurious surroundings. The rich, elegant young woman he once knew had turned into a shadow of herself. Her once perfect appearance was now tattered, and there was something about the way she walked, with her head bowed low, that made James realize how far she had fallen. He couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. There was a part of him that relished the idea of her serving him. After all, she had bullied him relentlessly in school, tormenting him with insults and laughter. But another part of him felt pity, a strange sense of responsibility. James had offered her a chance. He had made the decision to hire her as a maid, not because he wanted to humiliate her, but because, in some way, he felt she deserved it. Perhaps it was his way of getting back at her for all the years of hurt, or maybe it was because he saw something in her, a vulnerability that had never been there before. The first few days were awkward. Agatha didn't speak much, and when she did, it was to apologize for everything she had done in the past. She had accepted the job with the quiet dignity of someone who knew she had nowhere else to go. Her hands were rough, the once soft skin now cracked from the chores she had been assigned. James watched her, noticing how diligently she worked, and how she had never once asked for a day off. Despite the discomfort in the air, James could sense that something was changing. Agatha was no longer the arrogant, untouchable girl from high school. She seemed humbled by her circumstances, and it made him wonder how she had ended up in this position. The woman who had once been so confident, so sure of her place in the world, was now barely recognizable. One evening, as James sat in his study, finishing up some work, he heard a knock on the door. It was Agatha. "James, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity." Her voice was soft, sincere. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, but there was a kind of gratitude in her eyes that he hadn't expected. "I don't know how I could ever repay you for everything you've done for me." James put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. He looked at her, wondering what she had gone through to bring her to this point. "Agatha, you don't need to thank me. I did it because I thought you deserved a chance." His voice was calm, but inside, he could feel the conflict rising within him. It wasn't just about her. It was about him too. "I was wrong back then, James." Agatha's voice shook slightly. "I hurt you, and I know I can't take that back. But I want you to know that I've changed. I'm not that person anymore." James looked at her for a long time. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, but the memories of high school, the teasing, the mockery were hard to erase. "I'm glad to hear that. But words don't change anything. Actions do." He paused. "Just keep proving to me that you're different. And maybe one day you can forgive yourself." As the weeks went by, Agatha's transformation continued. She worked tirelessly, often staying late into the night to clean the mansion. She started taking on more responsibility, doing her best to prove herself. The house began to feel warmer, as if Agatha's quiet dedication had infused it with a sense of life that had been missing for so long. James noticed the little things, the way she treated the staff with kindness, how she always made sure the house was in perfect order. But there was one thing that caught his attention more than anything else: her sadness. Agatha would sometimes disappear into the garden, her face full of sorrow as she stared at the horizon. There was a deep, unspoken pain behind her eyes, and it made James wonder what had happened to her. How had she gone from being the queen of the high school to this? One evening, James decided to approach her. It was late, and the sky had turned a deep shade of purple, the stars beginning to twinkle faintly above. He found her in the garden, kneeling beside a small flower bed, her fingers brushing the petals gently. "Agatha." James's voice was soft as he approached her. She looked up, startled, but quickly composed herself. "James, I didn't hear you come out." "It's okay. I was just wondering about something." James paused, unsure how to ask her the question that had been bothering him. "I've seen you out here a lot lately. What's on your mind? What's bothering you?" For a moment, Agatha said nothing. She simply stared at the flowers in front of her, her expression distant. But then, her voice broke the silence, almost a whisper. "I had everything once," she said, her voice full of regret. "I had everything I ever wanted. But I lost it all. My family, my friends, everything." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was so sure of myself back then, but now I realize how wrong I was." James stood there in silence, feeling the weight of her words. He had no idea what she had been through, but he could see the depth of her pain. For the first time, he felt a pang of sympathy for her, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. "I don't know what to do anymore, James," Agatha continued, her voice shaky. "I've lost myself in all of this. I don't know who I am anymore." James took a step forward, his voice firm yet gentle. "You're Agatha. You're still the same person, even if you've made mistakes. Everyone does. It's what we do afterward that defines us." Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. James and Agatha began to form an unexpected bond. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but there was a quiet understanding between them, something that went beyond their troubled past. Agatha started confiding in James more often, and he, in turn, began to open up to her as well. It was clear to James that Agatha was trying to rebuild herself, and he found himself rooting for her. He started to see her as more than just the girl who had tormented him in school. She was a woman who had made mistakes, but she was also someone who was willing to change. But just when things seemed to be looking up, a new challenge arose. One afternoon, James received a call from one of his old business partners. The news was unexpected and frankly alarming. "James, we need to talk. There's something happening with the company." The voice on the other end of the line was serious. "We need you to come in right away." As James arrived at the office, he could feel the tension in the air. His business partner, Bullied, was waiting for him. The news Bullied had for him was unsettling. Someone had been leaking company secrets, compromising their business deals. Worse, there were rumors that it had come from someone close to James. "What do you mean?" James's voice was tight with anger and confusion. "Who would do something like that?" Bullied's face was grim. "We don't know yet, but we're working on it. We'll get to the bottom of it." James felt a sudden knot form in his stomach. The first thought that crossed his mind was Agatha. She had access to all his personal information. But he quickly dismissed the idea. Agatha had been nothing but loyal to him. She had proven herself over and over. But as the days passed, the investigation into the leaks deepened. And then one evening, James received a phone call that would change everything. "James, we found something." Bullied's voice was frantic. "It's Agatha. She's been stealing information from the company and selling it to our competitors." James's heart dropped. He could hardly believe it. Agatha, the woman who had worked so hard to rebuild her life, was now the one responsible for betraying him. He had to confront her. Did Agatha really betray James, or is there something deeper at play? Will she be able to redeem herself, or has she lost everything? Don't miss out on what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe to find out the shocking twist in the next part of this story. Stay tuned, and share your thoughts below.